afternoon. My name is Evgeny Bажанов, and I opened my YouTube channel, and the title of this channel is The Dialogue of Civilizations. My wife, late wife Natalie, and myself, we've been studying international relations and the world at large for about 50 years, first as diplomats and then as political scientists and historians. And I'd like to share some of the views we have on the world, on different civilizations, cultures, states. And I'll start with the United States. We spent over almost 10 years in the US working there. And then we visited that country many times, and even being in Moscow, in our homeland, we continued to watch that country, to study it, to meet Americans. And today I'll talk about our first arrival in the United States, which was in 1973. It was a period when the Soviet Union, that's the name of our country at that time, now it's called Russia, at that time we called it the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union and the United States were at the Cold War. They didn't fight against each other, but relations were quite tense. There was a competition between these two countries in the ideological sphere, in the political sphere, in the economic sphere, actually in all spheres of the life all over the world. They were called two superpowers. But at that period, when we arrived in San Francisco, it was 1973, relations somewhat improved between the Soviet Union and the United States. And that period was called détente, improvement, or rapprochement between these two superpowers. And in the framework of this détente, the two governments decided to exchange consulates, actually consulate general. And Americans opened their consulate general in Leningrad, which is now called St. Petersburg. And the Soviet Union, our government, opened our consulate in general in San Francisco. So we arrived in San Francisco, it was March 1973, and we went to the building of the Consulate General. It was a beautiful building, 7 stories, located in a very prestigious area of San Francisco, Pacific Heights. Everything was nice and good about this building, about the consulate and the neighborhood where the consulate was, with the exception of the fact that there was no guards, no protection of the consulate. There were only 4 officials, 4 staff members from the Soviet Union in the beginning. Then we had more people, but at that time 4 persons, and for the entire building, and no guards, no protection. So we applied to the local government, San Francisco mayor's office, to provide guards for the consulate. And the answer was that you are guests of the federal government, so you should apply to Washington, to the State Department. Our foreign ministry applied to the State Department. The answer was that federal government doesn't have enough people to provide guards for the Soviet consulate, not enough people in FBI. So we didn't have any protection. At the same time, I should notice that FBI did have people enough to put about 10 cars around our consulate, in the vicinity of the consulate. And every time we left our building, even by foot, we were followed by one of these cars. And it was very interesting that some kind of affinity even developed between those people who watched us and us, Soviet diplomats. For example, we played soccer on Sundays at public stadiums, 2 teams from the consulate, 1 team against the other team. And people from FBI who watched us were present at the games. And a girl and a boy, a young lady and a young man who followed me and my wife, they rooted for us. And my friend from the consulate, he played on the other team. And the FBI people who followed him on an everyday basis were also at the stadium rooting for him. So it was kind of, they even certain occasions supported us. But anyway, no protection. And at the same time, the consulate was very active, and the life around the consulate and in the consulate was extremely active. It was a time when we became very popular in the US. You know, after so many years of absence of any contacts between the west coast of the United States and Soviet government, suddenly you have a consulate and you have détente, improvement of relations. So many people in California and adjoining states wanted to develop some kind of links with the Soviet Union, cultural, sports, economic, political. So all of them were attracted, to the consulate. And as I said, we were, some kind like almost like movie stars. You go anywhere, and as soon as people learn that you have Soviet diplomats, you are surrounded by a lot of attention. For example, you go to a reception, and there are diplomats from all over the world: Japanese diplomats, Italian, French, and other. And nobody pays much attention to these diplomats. But as soon as they see Soviet diplomats, Americans come around you, ask questions, to talk to you. And not only at the receptions, but anywhere we went. We go to a shopping center, we go to a sports arena. As soon as people learn that you are from the Soviet Union, and that now there are a lot of Russians, of course, in the US, and they're not a novelty, but at that time, we were very rare, and especially diplomats, and especially in this, as I said, atmosphere of détente. So you go anywhere, as soon as people learn that you're from the Soviet Union, you're a Soviet diplomat, they invite you somewhere. They invite you to a ranch, to a restaurant, to their homes, and not only this, but we were also very popular as speakers. There was a line of organizations, Rotary clubs, universities, whole townships, which wanted to have us as speakers, and some of them waited for the whole year until somebody from the consulate could come and deliver a speech. That's how popular we were. It doesn't mean that we were welcomed by everyone, and that everyone liked the Soviet Union and us as representatives of the Soviet Union. There were quite a few people who were very much against the Soviet Union, our policies, who had traditional dislike of the Soviet Union, even if they had curiosity. This didn't mean that they, as I said, they liked us. And some of them used to come to the consulate, and some of them used to come on a regular basis. To give you a few examples. At that time, it was very difficult for Soviet citizens to emigrate from our country. And a lot of Jews who lived in the Soviet Union wanted to emigrate. And though the Soviet government in 1971 opened some way for them to emigrate, still it was very difficult to leave the country. You had to pay money for your education, which was free of charge in the Soviet Union, and you have to fill out a lot of forms and things like that. So quite a few Jewish organizations in the US were not happy with our policies towards this immigration of Jews from the Soviet Union. And there was one organization which was particularly anti-Soviet on this matter. It was called the Jewish Defense League, very military-like organization. So one day I arrive at the consulate, leave my car, park my car near the consulate, and then I go to the building to start my working day. And so I go to the consulate, and there are two young fellows from the Jewish Defense League. They go with me, accompany me, and spit on me, and say nasty things in perfect Russian, swear words. And I'm asking them, what's wrong? What do you want from me? And they say, well, you're guilty of killing Jews during the World War II in the Ukraine. And I'm saying, what are you talking about? I was born in 1946 after the end of that war. But they continue to go with me and spit on me. And they shout that I'm an anti-Semite and things like that. And they used to come very often. And every time they would leave, another group comes. It comes in an armored car, and there are guys emerging from that car, and they have special signs showing that they belong to white power national Nazi socialist party of the United States. It's like a fascist party. And these people, they come to the consulate and they deliver a note. And the note says that, the note says, we are Aryans and you Russians are also Aryans. So let's combine our resources, build a missile, put all colored people on this missile, including Jews, blacks, Chinese, and everyone, and send them to the moon with one-way ticket. And they also ask in this letter to free all fascists, all Nazi criminals who were imprisoned after the war and were still in prison. And of course, we reject what they say and tell them, to get lost. And when they leave, they shout at us that we're Zionists. 10 minutes ago, I was an anti-Semite, and now I'm a Zionist. Okay, they come and go. Then another person comes, a truck, and a guy who looks exactly like Stalin, Soviet dictator, comes out of the truck. He has Stalin's mustache. He has his uniform, and he takes from the truck a cage, and then ladies emerge from the truck, dressed in ethnic costumes. One is dressed like a Kazakh lady, another is a Ukrainian lady, and then is a Moldavian, all those ethnic groups which lived in the Soviet Union. And he beats these ladies one by one and then puts them in the cage. So another performance. And sometimes people who came to the consulate to demonstrate near the consulate, they had nothing to do with the Soviet Union, didn't have any complaints about us. Nevertheless, they did come to our consulate. So one day, for example, a group of people comes and they shout that they're against Singaporean government. They say that they have a sign that says that the Singaporean government allows to use crocodile skin to make shoes and ladies' purses, which is outrageous. So I come to these people and say, we have nothing to do with that. Why did you come here? We don't do it. It's the Singaporean government. Go to the Singaporean consulate. They say if we go to the Singaporean government, nobody pays any attention to us. When we come to the Soviet consulate, the entire media is here, TV, radio, and they show us everywhere. So we were a very convenient place, to have publicity for all kinds of people of this sort. Among those who used to come to our consulate, there were people with strange ideology, philosophy, I would say not quite normal people. And again, to give you a few examples. And they used to come also in big numbers. One day, a lady comes, and she's dressed very unusually. She has a yellow short, she has blue slacks, brown shoes, something very unusual on her head. And she says, in a perfect English, that she's the daughter of the Russian Tsar Nicholas II, who was killed by the Bolsheviks in 1918. Her name is Anastasia. Everybody thinks that she was also killed by the Bolsheviks, but she is alive. And she says, my father, Nicholas II, is also alive. He was kidnapped by Americans. He lives in a prison under California. And she says, I can show where my father lives, but and I'll show where the gold of the Tsar is. I know that you need my father as the Tsar of Russia, and I know that you need the gold of our crown. But, she says, in exchange, I want you to allow me to open a Chinese restaurant in Moscow. Now it doesn't sound funny, but at that time we didn't have any private industry. Everything was state-owned. And we didn't allow anybody to open any restaurants, especially Chinese or American restaurants in Moscow. But I had to answer something to this lady. So I say, the policy of the Soviet government is to allow to open Korean restaurants in Moscow, not Chinese. If you want to open a Korean restaurant, no problem. But she insisted on the Chinese restaurant. So for 7 years, she used to come and ask for the permission to open a Chinese restaurant in Moscow. At the same time, she was useful sometimes. For example, I have to go to the library to pick up some books, city library, but I don't have time. She comes to the consulate. I say, Anastasia, please go to the library, pick up some books for me. She goes, she comes back very agitated, very excited, and there are people in our waiting room at the consulate, Americans, different people, and she shouts, here are the books. But, FBI, CIA, they chased me and they put a microphone in my ass, and she shows the microphone, presumably. And I say, okay, I'll switch it off. And I pretend that I switch off something on my table. She says, oh, now it's much nicer. And every time there was a demonstration against the Soviet Union near our consulate, and she happened to be at the consulate at that moment, she would go outside on her own initiative with a big umbrella and chase away demonstrators. She could handle very easily a crowd of 100 persons, even more, because nobody wanted to have, to deal with that lady, to confront that lady. Sometimes she would bring a list of people who were guilty, as she claimed, against the Soviet Union. They were guilty of criticizing the Soviet Union. So she would give a list of these people with their names, with their telephone numbers, and say, punish these scoundrels. So that another lady, unusual person who visited our consulate. Then one day, a man comes to the consulate. He is very tall, and he looks exactly like Fidel Castro, leader of the, now late leader of the Cuban Communist Revolution. And she's dressed like Fidel Castro. And she talks to me, and he says, I am chief of the guerrilla movement, which is stationed in Nicaragua. He says, we're going to attack San Francisco. One group will go by ships and will attack San Francisco from the ocean side. And another group will go on to the mountains, Sierra Nevada, and will attack San Francisco from the east side, from the mountains, where encircle the city and then storm it. And this man, who looked exactly like Fidel Castro, and who said that he had this guerrilla movement stationed in Nicaragua and with this plan to attack San Francisco, when he explained everything to me, I said, we're not terrorists, we're communists, but not terrorists. So why did you come here? He said, I came here exactly because you are communists. And he repeated that they needed marijuana, dynamite, and when the street fighting will start in San Francisco, he wanted help from the Soviet diplomats who he wanted us to participate in this fighting. Well, it was obvious the man was, of course, crazy. And he saw that I didn't trust him. So he said, you don't trust me? I said, no, well, of course I trust you. He said, if you don't trust me, this is my ID. And he produced a knife like this and showed it to me. Then he came again. He brought teeth of his killed comrade. Then he brought a plan of street fighting in San Francisco. We got tired of him. We complained to FBI, and he disappeared. Then one day I get a letter from San Luis Obispo State Prison. It's a town on the way from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and they have a state prison there. And it says that the highest revolutionary command of California sentenced Consul Bajhanov to death for his arrogance. He drank at the reception, instead of traditional Russian liquor vodka, champagne. And because of this, they obviously, in prison they had a TV set, and he watched some program where they showed reception at our consulate, and so they sentenced me to death. And it was signed Eugene Arguella, KGB chief of California. That's the guy who used to come looking like Fidel Castro to the Soviet consulate, and then he was imprisoned. Then there was another guy, a Soviet sailor. He one day he came to the consulate and said that he had defected from the Soviet Union, but now he wants to help his motherland. And I say, what do you mean by helping? He said, well, I have a friend, Nikolai, who also fled from the Soviet Union, and he already stole a plane, a military plane from the US, and now he's flying to the Soviet Union on this plane. And give me an assignment. For example, I can steal a submarine, American submarine, and bring it to the Soviet Union. So, I chase him away, and things like that. And there were quite a few people of this sort who used to come to the consulate with very strange ideas. At this point, I'd like to stop, and I would continue this description of how we started to work at the consulate in San Francisco, and how at times unusual and difficult that assignment was. Thank you so much.